And he had this penchant. When he started a house, he would put up 2x4s in frames so that he would know exactly where the windows would be, which is a very innovative way of doing architecture, because it made the views totally accessible to the people who had the...
And this was kind of like a mock-up then. This was
Right.
to get the sense of maybe wasn't quite as where he wanted it, and he might shift it or something.
Sure.
Yeah.
He would set up the frame on 2x4s and look out, and he would suit the place where the windows were to the view.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you know.
Yeah.
But that was just one of his innovations. And, you know, he made it possible for us to put together the 7-foot
Right.
Contact Is the Only Love,
Right.
which Michael Callahan, whom I had just met, and was working with me on because he was the sound.
He was at the Tape Music, this
Yes,
Tape Center in San
yes,
Francisco,
he was at
right?
the Tape Center with
Yeah.
Morton Subotnick and Ramon Sender and what's her name?
Right, Ramon is he contacted a few times. He belongs to the Save Druid Heights group,
Good.
I got a couple of things. He commented on some things. I haven't seen anything from him for a while, but he did last fall.
I didn't know that Ramon knew Roger. I don't know if he ever did.
I don't know if he did, but it sounds like he maybe was out at Druid Heights, or I don't know how he found out, about the group.
I knew him through the Tape Music Center and very separately from Roger. And of course, I never knew the name Druid Heights.
No, it really was a separate, I've come to, you're not the first person who said that, it was Roger's place, or the Canyon, or the Camino, or, different names like that.
No, I don't remember anything except Rogers.
Just Rogers.
And, it was difficult even then, getting there.
Yeah, the road.
And to construct that piece
Right.
and to move it out of there to the San Francisco Museum of Art, modern art, which was at that time in the city center.
Yeah, I remember the old location. Yeah, across from City Hall, and that one of those Beaux Art buildings there. Yeah.
Beautiful setting, and the director was one of the most generous people I've ever met, George Culler, and he sent for all of my work, which I had shown for the first time in New York at Allen Stone, and it was part of my that was my first big show at that moment. And he made it, and the 2 nights of Who Are You and What's Happening, with all those celebs, supposedly. I mean, yes. Anyway, Roger was extremely generous altogether, and he and Barbara at the time were a great couple. And I'm looking forward to seeing Barbara in New York.
Yeah.
She doesn't do internet at all.
Right.
And I do have her phone number, and she was very friendly on the phone, but we just haven't been in the same place at the same time.
Well, I connected, I've been in touch with Roger's son, Tagore, quite a bit.
I knew Tagore, but...
He was living by then with his mother in the city, I think, by the time, in 57 or 58 is when his parents broke up, and then he was out there on the weekends, he said a lot.
Yeah, I remember, and he was quite young.
Yeah, he was probably born around 1950, so.
Well, so he was 10 or something.
Yeah, he would have been 10 around 1960, so he would have been almost a teenager by the time you were doing Contact.
Yeah, because Contact, I think, was 62.
62 or 63, something, yeah.
And, you could sleep at Rogers, you could just be there at any time of the day, and he was very adaptive to anything, and he was so happy working on that piece.
So Roger had worked on it too.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I mean, well, he knew how to do things. And
Right.
That 7-foot one is not made out of metal like
Right.
the small things that we made in 2002 for the gallery in San Francisco originally. But we made 6 of them. I still have 6 of them. The original was made out of a type of plywood.
Plywood.
But plywood with kind of a masonite top layer
Yeah.
because it was more paintable.
Right.
And I'm sure it was his idea of that material and how to fashion it and how to get the plastics and the lighting and
Oh yeah.
the motor and
Well, I hope we can get inside to the main house there, because there's in the back room there's his mechanism that I built. Now I understand that it was mostly for controlling the lights. They did not have these dimmer switches then, that you just put into your switch.
No, not at all. That they were a little motor with things that went up and down.
Right. Well, there's this huge metal box out there with switches and dials and things on it inside a closet, and it's like a control for all the lights in that house.
Oh, in the house.
So you can change the mood of all the lighting in there. Unfortunately, there's no electricity in there anymore. But
Well,
then the other thing I've been told, and including by Roger's son, is that somehow in that back room with all those Japanese shoji screens, that the ceiling can be adjusted in height. For reasons I don't know.
The ceiling.
Yes.
And there was heat in where you put your feet and
Right around in the front of the table in there. Yeah.
I mean,
The sunken table. Yeah.
it was really a wonderful room.
Oh yeah.
That's the original.
There it
That's
is.
the original.
Yeah.
And there's some pictures that I found in the Marin Independent Journal with you working on it, and I assume that is were probably taken out there, or you're like inside it, reaching around with a screwdriver in the open framework.
Definitely in Roger's studio. In his shop.
It did not look like an installation type job. It looked like an initial assembly type thing happening.
Yeah, I remember there were a lot of
so-
pictures taken, which is unusual at that time.
Right.
We didn't get that much documentation.
Right,
You
it's
get
so
nowadays.
easy now. Just
Anyway,
now there's too much almost.
but the memory of Roger as a person is very active to me, and there were a lot of people around that he knew, and of course Elsa was
Right.
there, although she wasn't as
Very quiet sort of person, I get the sense, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and she wasn't as involved as
Right.
He and Barbara. And I knew Alan because I had worked. I was at KPFA, and I was one of the first people to help produce him.
And
really?
Sandy Jacobs, I guess, also.
Sandy took credit for everything.
Everything, yeah.
Sandy was a pain in the ass, if
Oh.
you pardon the expression,
Yeah.
but he acted like he was Alan Watts. Alan, was a peculiar person.
Yes.
How so?
Well, it was very evident that he came to this country because he had run off with his superior in the church's daughter.
Right.
And that was his wife who he came here with. And
Right.
that's the reason they came here, because they couldn't manage it over there. And he was, an Episcopalian?
Episcopalian, and he was at University of Michigan or somewhere. First, he was a chaplain at a university for a brief time.
Yeah. And then
in the 40s.
he came and
And then his marriage ended while he was there, basically.
Really?
Oh yeah, and then his second wife he met there, and he had an affair, and that brought his university chaplaincy to a screeching halt,
That's
as
very
I
interesting. So
understand
his
it.
wife that I knew wasn't the daughter that he'd
Oh
run off.
no, there were three major involvements for him, and so his two older daughters, who are the ones who are in charge of his papers and things, and they just published the collected letters. So they were born in England, and they're the first marriage.
Oh,
and then he had 4 or 5 children from the second marriage when he was living down over the hill from here in Mill Valley, and just not very far from where Gary Snyder and Loch McCorkle and them were all there, in the Homestead Valley area. And he lived near there and was trying to live a suburban American life, and that didn't last too long. A few years, it just,
And before we lived on the barge, we lived on Throckmorton.
Uh-huh. Oh, you lived on Throckmorton?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
With Pam and Bill Loughborough and Buckwheat.
Oh.
And my first wife, Jane, Rhoda's daughter.
Uh-huh.
I mean, Rhoda's mother.
Rhoda's mom, yeah, okay. Down on Throckmorton.
Very nice second story that we had there before Gordon gave me the berth for the barge. And
the barge that you didn't have. Yes, he gave you the berth.
A berth for the stupidest gift I had ever thought of receiving.
Gordon was a visionary, right? He had a vision. You docked next to him.
Well, Gordon,
he was good at acquiring friends that he wanted to be around. He was very intentional that way.
I mean, Philip Lamantia took me to a party at Gordon and Jacqueline's in Mill Valley. They had a beautiful mansion.
On McGee.
Were they in McGee?
95 McGee.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds right.
That's a nice spot up there.
And at that party, he introduced me to Harry Parch.
Mm-hmm.
And he had just gotten Harry the studio in Sausalito.
Yeah.
And I spent a lot of time at that party doing nothing but talking to Harry, because Harry was an endless talker. And he told me all about his music and his instruments, and he was building them, and he needed help. I was working at KPFA at the time, and living in Throckmorton. So I started working with him and helping him build the instruments, and then eventually finding the people to play them from the army base, from the orchestra of the band. I mean, at the army place, because they were all jazz musicians who had been drafted, and I believe they were drafted, and they were wonderful musicians, and that's how everything happened. And that's how I lost my wife, because the last person from that fort was Bill Buck, who wanted desperately to be in the orchestra, and Harry refused, because Harry was gay, and he liked young boys, but Bill was either too young or too something. So it took me a long time to persuade Harry to let Bill turn the pages on the Cromelodeon, which is what he wound up doing. And we became very friendly, and we took him by that time I had the barge. And we were living on it with the Loughboroughs and Buckwheat and my wife, and we turned him on to grass, which he took to immediately. And after a couple of months, all of a of a sudden my wife and my 2 kids were gone. And we couldn't figure out for a week or 10 days what happened to them. And we didn't know that he had money. He was always in grungy clothes and driving a very old Ford, and I think maybe a Mustang. And, it turned out that he was a multimillionaire from his family, the Buck family,
big Buck family, Marin.
Yeah.
The Marin Buck family.
Yeah.
No, Sacramento.
Sacramento.
Yeah. His grandfather was the first one to initiate railroad cars with ice in them to take fruit and vegetables back east. So that's what their fortune was based on originally. But real estate all over the place. And we found out that he had taken Jane and my kids to Nevada to get a divorce. They were never married, but of course they had Paul, and Paul is the one who bought this house for Rada.
It all connects.
Well, it's being driving in here. I grew up 1 mile from here. I live. So it's one just out on the west side over there, up in the hills. So it's very familiar. But none of these houses were here when I was a kid.
Yeah.
This is all built up in the 80s and 90s. This area here.
It's a great. Anyway, so that all connected. Yes. And Gordon was a very friendly person, and he was very appreciative of the fact that I had worked with Harry, because he had taken Harry under his wing, and he certainly contributed a lot to. I mean, I decided to do Gate 5 Records, and I produced Requiem, percussion dances, and then Oedipus. And I produced the Oedipus on
the barge?
No, not on the barge. In the middle of Sausalito. Right? A big production. And Harry's favorite, he was unhappy about the Mills, which was the original production of Oedipus. Who was the guy? Arch Oboler or something like that? Anyway. And I worked with Harry at least for 2 or 3 years, and then I knew him for the rest of his life. I hitchhiked from Sausalito to Illinois when he did The Bewitched, and he was wonderful. And at the time I knew him, he was. Maybe he was drinking, but he wasn't alcoholic by any means. And he was very in the closet about his sexuality. He had problems with women. I think, did I tell you the story about Ann Halpern?
I can't remember. I think you might have said something the other day. I know you said something about Ann Halpern.
She came to the studio one time. They had known each other forever, and I liked her, and I liked Larry, and she came and said, "Harry, I'm finally going to commission you to do a piece." And he said, "Ann, how come after all this time?" And she said, "Of course you'll do it with conventional instruments." And he threw her out of the... This is the second time he threw people out of the studio. The first one was Bob Duncan and the filmmaker, whose name escapes me at the moment, Kenneth Anger.
Kenneth Anger,
They came with a 16 millimeter projector and showed us the film that Kenneth had made, the Pleasure Dome.
Inside the Pleasure Dome, right.
Something like that.
I think that's what it's called.
It had plectrum percussion dances on it, and Harry flipped out. How can you dare use my music? and Kenneth had the...
Oh, they pirated his music for the film.
And Kenneth had the nerve to say to him, but Anais Nin is one of your friends, and she's the principal character. I don't give a damn. You know, she should have told me too, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And then Duncan made the mistake of saying to him, but Harry, you're one of us. Boom. He took the projector and threw it out the door, and the two of them, you know.
Wow.
And he never forgave them.
Wow.
Anyway, and the funny thing is, you can still buy, or not buy, but rent.
No.
Clubs and
Yes, you can. That's where I know that. I've seen that back in the video store days. You know, I saw Kenneth Anger section.
Because Harry wasn't good at doing things like suing, and Gordon didn't want to get involved.
Well, somebody told me he thought that I was at the Mill Valley Film Festival last fall, and I got talking to a guy there. They showed Broughton's The Bed, and they showed Uncle Yanko, Agnes Varda's film about her quote unquote uncle, you know, and they let me get up ahead of time and say something about Druid Heights. I insinuated myself over there for 5 minutes.
Is there any truth to that about?
Well, The Bed was all shot at Druid Heights, right? So
I knew Jimmy well,
and of course, you
Jimmy
know,
was another.
Varda's in it, and so I contact them. I heard they were showing these, and I said, well, you know, there's this place, Druid Heights near Mill Valley. It's very connected to these films. In fact, one was shot there. Would you let me say a few words about it? They said, sure. So so anyway,
what I was going to ask you though is, I knew Agnes, but not in that context, but at the Chelsea Hotel where she lived for a time. But was she really related to the young?
A cousin, yeah. Her father was like his first or second cousin.
And so
she called me uncle, you know, but he wasn't really uncle, but he was, and she, you know, it's so funny in the beginning of that film, she says, I thought I was coming to America, I was going to find my wealthy relative, like a wealthy attorney or doctor, or I didn't know anything about him, and she may be tongue-in-cheek. But anyway, at the showing, there was a guy there, a film expert guy I got talking to out in the plaza afterwards. We went down and chatted for a while, and he said he thought Kenneth Anger might have also filmed out at Druid Heights, but he didn't know which one it was, you know. But he had the feeling that, and I said, well, I haven't heard of that yet, but anything is possible out there. Anything.
Kenneth was an interesting guy.
Yeah.
We were in the Los Angeles Film Festival together, and when my film that I made with Michael and with Ivan Ostrakov, Why, was filmed there. That we actually won a second or third prize, but Kenneth won the first. He was a decent guy, but not for Harry. Harry was a very jealous. But you know, all the time I knew him and worked with him, I never had a bad word with Harry. He didn't agree with. I mean, for instance, now I have a manuscript which Stanford gave me where they say that Loughborough was the one who put the production together, which is not true at all, but I'm losing my track. At 89, my memory ain't what it used to be. But Harry could be very difficult.
It's a new biography on him. He's getting a little more attention lately on Harry.
Oh, a new biography, huh?
Just came out.
No kidding. But I mean, the biography by the English guy is great.
Yeah.
And I learned things that I didn't know about Harry. I mean, Harry always insisted that he was born in China when his parents were missionaries, and he was born in Oakland. and I never knew that he had an affair with Rudolph Valentino, but that was in that biography, which was before I knew him, when he lived in L.A. But who wrote the new book?
I have it. I just ordered it. I should have brought it.
No, I'll order it immediately.
It should be on Amazon there.
Of course.
Yeah.
As soon as I get home, I'll order it. He had an amazing life.
There wasn't too much about it. I didn't feel there was a lot on his time.
But I mean, the big biography, I can't remember his name, I have it. It came out years and years ago, and it's a wonderful biography because the guy did amazing research. And the person who is the biggest Harry Partch guy who released a lot of the records and printed stuff is Paul Blackburn in the Midwest. He really, we've been working on an opera where we're using Harry's instruments that were done by John Schneider, and that's the second set. The third set is in Cologne in Germany.
I thought there were only two.
No, there's three. And the set in Germany is fantastic because the guy who made them, the cabinet maker, actually improved things. Really quite amazing. When we built the Eroica, and that's what I said, that Bill Loughborough did not. He worked on them, but it wasn't his idea at all. We built these boxes, and the big one was 4 foot by 8 foot, and it took Harry and me days visiting lumber yards to find the block because it had to be straight grain, and it was like a 4 by 12 or something like that.
Pretty big piece, yeah.
And so we made the box, and we came back the next day after we had finished it, and we had tested it, and Bill Loughborough was working at the Navy Yard, so he brought an audio oscillator and a oscilloscope. Harry had never heard of either of those. He was amazed because we were able to tune the block to the resonator. But the next day we came, and all of a sudden there were strips of redwood all around the thing. And I said, Harry, what did you do? Because neither he or I were really great carpenters, but he had put redwood strips over everything. I said, why did you do that, Harry? He said, because you guys put screws all over, and those screws were not equally apart, and I couldn't stand seeing them anymore. So
he covered them up.
And I would have glued. And those strips are going to have a little bit of effect on all your careful work with the oscilloscope and everything, right?
Not
much.
At all, because the boxes were really heavy duty.
Okay, so it didn't matter.
But that was very hard.
Where were you working on that piece? Do you remember?
Of course.
Yeah.
In the shipyard.
At the shipyard.
In Sausalito there.
Yeah. This huge building, which belonged to the landlord, and which Gordon had gotten for Harry.
Yeah.
And I think Gordon paid for it.
Near the slip. Yeah.
No, at Gate 5.
At Gate 5, yeah.
That's why I named the records Gate 5.
Yeah. Very interesting.
But there was a big building up there then. Okay.
That's not now.
I don't know. I guess when I think of the bigger buildings in Sausalito, I think of some other ones not up in that area.
This was a big office building. I think two stories at least.
Okay.
Yeah, 2 stories. And
Yeah,
we had a huge studio. I mean, because
things are so different there now.
and
Changed so much.
we had about a dozen instrumentalists. Kithara, and I helped build the first Kithara. And anyway, I don't know. So do you want to get going?
Whenever, like I say, I'm just pretty much. I probably will use the restroom here before we go last minute, and then we can go out there and
We're outside the restaurant.
So let's.